Hi, I'm Sophia Kennedy, and this is my portfolio for VMCS 2991B.
Everybody knows this one. It's an old, raunchy old C tone. So everybody bang their feet and clap their hands. Oh, the year was 1778. How I wish I was in Sherbrooke now. A letter of marque came from the king. Scummiest vessel I'd ever seen. God damn them all. I was told we cruise the seas for American gold. Fire no guns, shed no tears. A broken man on a Halifax pier, the last of Barrett's privateers. Oh, well, Sid Barrett could ride the town. How I wish I was in Sherbrooke now. 20 brave men, all fishermen, who would make for him Antelope's crew, God damn them all. I was told we cruise the seas for American gold. We'd fire no guns, shed no tears. I'm a broken man on a Halifax pier, the last of Barrett's privateers.
That was my Uncle Gary singing Barrett's Privateers. Just this past summer, I think it was in June or July. But I chose to start off with that video for this project because of how relevant it is. And I think that there's many aspects that go into that song and that go into that video shown. The first one being that it's, as he says in the beginning, it's a song he always sings. It's pretty much a traditional Cape Breton party song. So when I reflect on my culture and what it means to be Cape Breton, I always remember him singing these at every family gathering, at every party. It's just a song that's always sung, so that really resonates with me, as well as why he's singing it. So in that video, he's singing it because they're fundraising for the Hawks Dream Field in where he lives in Dominion, Cape Breton. So that also ties into how important community is within Cape Breton and how every member of that community works together and you work for kind of a common goal. And that reflects with, your neighbor, like you do anything for your neighbor, no matter what, or anything for your community because everything is a community goal. So it's very community oriented. So I think that is what makes it really culturally unique, being from Cape Breton. And I guess that kind of, plays up the role of being friendly, why we're always so friendly, so nice, is that community is something that's really important to us. And it's something that I know for me was important to me growing up. And it was instilled in me, to always be nice to your neighbor, always. My father's family is from Louisbourg in Cape Breton, and I guess that's most or best associated with the Fortress of Louisbourg National Historic Site. And a really interesting aspect of my cultural identity and my heritage is that, my grandparents and my great-grandparents actually lived on the site. So in the 1960s, they were subjected to the second expropriation of the land. So the government moved them to a nearby area known now as Catalone. So basically their house was loaded onto a flatbed truck and driven 20 minutes away. Over Thanksgiving this past year, I had the opportunity of going back to the site where my great-grandparents had their house in Louisbourg and seeing the field at which it once stood, and all that remains now is the front step or the side door step. But it was a really neat experience to be able to stand on the step and look out over the same view that they would have had when they lived there. And it really plays an important role into my cultural identity and heritage because it shows or it demonstrates that kind of connection with the land. And an example of this is that after my great-grandparents were moved 20 minutes away from the step, my great-grandfather used to walk to it in the middle of the night, which I found very odd, but very interesting that he felt attached or kind of connected to that area. And it was really important to me to be able to go back and just kind of see what it was like from my perspective now. That being said, being from Cape Breton, I do still fit the stereotypical maritime or Atlantic Canadian. So my aunt fishes lobster for a living, so I have lots of pictures of her on her boat. And I have lots of pictures of, my family fishing lobster and catching lobster. So I think lobster is also a very important part of my cultural identity is the fisheries. So my aunt fishes tuna and crab and lobster. So growing up, we always had fresh seafood. Somebody would always have scallops or crab or lobster. And really looking back, what makes that unique and special is that instead of going to Sobeys or Clearwater and buying lobster, I would hop in my dad's truck and we'd drive down to the wharf and we'd go into the lobster pound, and you're literally buying the lobsters right as they come off the boat. So you can't get any more fresh than that, and it's a really unique experience. When you go and you're able to buy your lobsters that locally, directly almost from the fishermen who caught them. But it's interesting because growing up, since I had access to fresh lobster like that, I find lobster in restaurants are not the same. So even at a very nice restaurant, I find that the lobster isn't as good as what I'm used to or what I could have if I went back home to Cape Breton. Another important part of my cultural identity is looking at the importance of my grandparents and my great aunts and uncles and how they've always played really prominent figures within my family. So they are the glue in a sense that holds the family together. So even we had a family reunion in the past year, and it's interesting to see all of the great aunts and uncles, and they all sit up at the front together because they're the oldest, and growing up you're taught to respect and to listen to them. So that's where a lot of the stories that I have growing up come from, and from my family in the past. Most notably would be my great uncle Gino, and he always talks about his father. And his father was a boxer in Cape Breton. And he was an Italian boxer. His name was Pordina, and his last name was Smith. But it's interesting that when Pordina's father immigrated from Italy to Canada, he changed his last name from Spinazzola to Smith. So he's only known as Pordina Smith. So growing up, I'd hear stories about what an amazing boxer he was, and what an amazing person. And I think, to an extent, living in Cape Breton, everybody knows somebody that worked at the steel plant or worked in the coal mines or worked as a farmer or a fisherman. And that kind of speaks in this story as well, is that alongside, being a boxer in his pastime, Pordino was a pipe fitter for the steel and iron company in Sydney, and he worked there for 33 years. And he was actually inducted, I think, into the Maritime Boxing Hall of Fame in 1986, I believe. So that's always a bit of family pride in that story that we take with us everywhere. And if you look at it like that, heritage of boxing in the family has translated to now. My family will rent a table and they'll go to Cape Breton and they'll watch boxing fights now. Although none of us box anymore, and we're not related to anybody that boxes now, but they still find that they're able to connect, I guess, in a sense, to that identity of boxing and the arena. So that's also a really interesting aspect of my family history. For me, reflecting on my family heritage and history of Cape Breton and thinking about culturally, how does that make me who I am? I can look at my father's side, who is more so an Irish immigrant who lived in Cape Breton. His side lived here for 150 years of farming. And then when I compare that to my mother's side of the family, who immigrated from Italy in the early 1900s, and it demonstrates to me that Cape Breton is such a mixing pot of different cultures that it creates almost like a multicultural community, especially if you look at places in Cape Breton like the pier, the Whitney Pier in Sydney. It's like that a lot. So I think, growing up and listening to those Irish tunes or Irish songs that my uncle would sing, and then even comparing that with Italian dishes of pasta that, my great uncle Gino would make for Christmas, that culturally it made me kind of diverse in a way. Diverse in a sense, but also gave me an identity of belonging to Cape Breton because it's such a melting pot that it kind of creates its own identity. And that's what Cape Breton means to me. It's a lot about family and it's a lot about community.
So for me, being a Cape Bretoner means that only Cape Bretoners can make fun of other Cape Bretoners. If you live on the mainland and you try making fun of Cape Bretoners, like that's not gonna fly.
That's too true, Tracy. Honest to God, it is. But you know what being a Cape Bretoner means to me? I know everyone's business, everything that's going on around me. I know who's sleeping with who bought whose house, who's having what for supper because I seen them up Sobeys. Like, that's what community is, and that's what Cape Breton is. Home in my heart.
Well, that concludes my VMCS portfolio. I'd really like to thank Tracy Martina for being willing to do that short little clip. I think it sums up really nicely what I've been trying to put across, and thank you so much for watching.